Hi!
Hi, welcome to Anglatinas. I'm Rosie.
And I'm Izzy, and we're best friends from the UK.
We've spent these last few years living and traveling in Latin America, being immersed in new cultures, falling in and out of love, and learning to balance the old with the new.
Join us on this journey as we explore life living between continents, living the dream, the highs, the lows, and everything in between.
We are
Anglatinas. We hope you enjoy the rides. Episode, we're talking about our language learning journeys. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Izzy and I live in Brazil, so I speak Portuguese. I came traveling around 6 years ago and I started learning Spanish, but I eventually came to live here in Brazil, and so now I'm fluent in Portuguese.
Yeah, my story is a little bit similar. I started traveling four or 5 years ago and learned Spanish that way, traveling in Argentina and Uruguay. And then I lived in Mexico for a little bit. So now I'm quite a confident Spanish speaker. And we love it. Speaking other languages has changed our lives in immeasurable ways. And it's definitely, for me, one of the best things that have happened to me. So we're going to be talking about that. But we also chat a little bit about how it wasn't always so easy.
Yeah, exactly. So we touch on some of the difficulties that learning a language brings, especially when you're learning a language in a new country, finding your way in a new place, and all of the things that come along with that. But that ultimately was the best thing that both of us ever did. Life-changing, mind-blowing. And we hope that you'll feel inspired to learn a new language one day too.
Definitely. So enjoy this episode, guys. Thank you so much for your support. And if you do enjoy this episode, remember, please share it with your friends and family. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. And we will see you in the next one. But enjoy this one. And thank you so much for listening.
Okay, let's get to it.
Well, I thought maybe a good place to start would be to say, well, this morning I had a Spanish lesson. I told you, didn't I? And when I started these Spanish lessons, a few people asked me, why are you doing that? Do you know what I mean? Like, or I got the sense, not so much people asked me, but I got the sense that people were like, why are you taking Spanish lessons? And I think,
which people?
I'm not going to call them out.
No, but I mean like Mexican people or English people.
No, my friends and family, whatever. Yeah. And I don't know, a couple of students, I can't really remember.
Name and shame.
Yeah, no. I got the vibe that, you know,
right.
And I understand it. I understand that people would say why, because, you know, maybe people think that, okay, you're fluent or whatever, that's it. But for me, it was, which I'm not, by the way, I would not ever say, yes, I'm fluent in Spanish. I don't accept that, because firstly, for me, until I can express myself, for me, communication is so important, and the way in which I express myself is like so key, I think, and I'm kind of obsessed with it. How people speak is like so important to who they are as a person, your identity or whatever. But until I can fully express myself in literally all of the most obscure topics or whatever, and deep topics in the world, until I can do that in Spanish in the same ways that I can do that in English, which I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but I feel that I'm quite that's ironic, isn't it, not being able to think about the word when you're talking about how articulate. I'm quite an articulate person until I feel like, okay, I could do that the same in Spanish as I can in English. I won't rest. You know what I mean? I don't want to stop being able to learning and practicing. The second thing is, if I know that if I don't practice it and if I don't maintain a certain level, or if I don't, because like right now in England, I've got no other opportunity to speak Spanish really. Like I can listen to music and read it, but actually speaking, I haven't got that opportunity. So that's why I'm doing it. Because I really don't want, now I've reached this, you know, quite a high point in my life of bilingualism, being able to speak another language, which is something that I didn't really think that I would ever be able to do. Well, I used to think about it and be like, oh, that would be really cool to speak another language. Or like, imagine being able to do that. I used to think about that when I was younger, or at school studying French or whatever. And so now I've got there, I would really hate, I would not be able to rest with myself if I let that skill diminish, do you know what I mean, or slip away. So it's something that I'm really proud of, that I want to kind of cling on to, or you know, keep doing for the rest of my life. And the third thing is, it's fun. Like, I do enjoy it. I really enjoy it. It's cool, isn't it? It's fun being able to speak another language, and that's the nuts and bolts of it. Is that
it's so fun. It's the best.
Yeah.
Oh, it really is the best. And well, I agree with you. I think that obviously now that you're in England, it's more necessary than it was before. Because even if it's not, even if you had reached the peak of fluency, you would still need to maintain it, because obviously when we're not practicing it, I don't believe that we 100% forget it, but it gets put away in a different box that we're not using as much, which is what happens with my English, I think. But I disagree a little bit about how you like categorize being fluent, because I think that, and this is something that I always say to my students as well, I think that from the moment where you're able to express yourself well, even if it's like in a limited amount of topics, I think from that point on you're fluent. And then there's various like different layers of fluency that you can add to over time. So for example, from a certain point you're fluent, but then obviously there's always going to be ways that you're going to be able to become more fluent, talk about a wider range of topics, express yourself in more sophisticated ways, or like expand your vocabulary even further. And that's true in our own language as well.
In your native language.
This is something that like people don't think about in terms of learning a second language. And it is so key to remember when you are learning a second language. Is like, for example, we're both people who are really interested by language in general. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love English and always have. I've always been really into reading and listening, and like just the concept of language and different words, and like learning new words and stuff is just fascinating to me, whether that's in English or in another language. So I think that at the beginning of the journey, it was like, I think it was one of the most difficult times in my life, that process, because
is that
of
why? Because you were so frustrated, thinking like, oh, I'm so clever, and I really want to share my ideas. I really want everyone I want to join in, and when you can't, it's soul destroying, isn't it?
Yeah. And you judge someone's intelligence or their personality through how they express themselves with language. So if someone's talking to you in like broken English or broken French or whatever the language is, then that's the image that you have of that person. Like you don't know what's in their brain, or like what they're thinking or philosophizing about, because they can't express it.
And that, I'm so glad you said that, because that's one of the key things, or one of the kind of my favorite things that I've learned from any like exposure to another language, being able to speak any other language to the level that I can, is like the appreciation of and how much it's taken for granted people that can speak English all around the world, or people that are in England that speak English, and you think, oh, can't speak English, that their English isn't very good. And it is, and how good, how good it is. It's kind of a cliche, isn't it, to say, oh, well, you English people can only speak one language, but if you actually go through the process and the arduous task of trying to learn a new language, and you come out the other side of it, that is no mean feat at all. And exactly that. And the people that are like us, articulate, intelligent, educated people, but because they don't have the words to show you that, it's almost like this, isn't it, this these bars. It's like literally holding them back. They can't prove to you everything that they've got in their. Ask this question, because this is something like I experienced in Mexico a lot. So you're talking about, okay, you get to this level of fluency, you can express yourself fine, and then there's this whole like other world of fluency, which is constantly growing, constantly like developing,
unlocking other levels, like on Duolingo.
Yeah, as it is for English every day for us, arguably, or like in different contexts.
Yeah.
In Mexico, I experienced that a lot because, and I don't know if this is unfair to say, but because of the richness of their Spanish. Do you know what I mean? So like, because there's your Spanish, and then there's a whole other section of Mexican Spanish, or of like colloquialisms and phrases and idioms and blah blah blah. So to me, it almost felt like I was frustrated because those things are something that I rely on so much in English. We always use them, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
You know, these idioms and expressions and whatnot.
Yeah.
And because there were so many that I didn't have access to, at least at the start in Mexico, that was also really, I was like, I want to get into this cool group of using these phrases. Do you know what I mean? Did you have that in Brazil? Is it like that in Portuguese with like?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Like slang.
The same. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the hardest things about my experience learning Portuguese is that I went to live in which is, for people who don't know, it's like
which a very nobody will know.
Nobody will know. It's a very small town in the mountains in Minas Gerais, which is like a mountainous region in the southeast of Brazil. And Mineiros, people from Minas, are like famous for their accent in Brazil. Like most people really enjoy it. Is like a really delicious accent. Like my mum says that she likes to hear Fernando speaking Spanish because it sounds like he's singing. And it's not Spanish, sorry, it's being Portuguese.
Yeah, okay.
And but they, and especially in the countryside where I was in the middle of nowhere, they use a lot of slang that's really specific to that region, and they shorten the words a lot. So like where in a full like written sentence maybe you use like 8 words, they'll like shorten it all down to maybe like 4 words,
8 letters.
Which we do in English as well. Like, I don't know, an example of like ain't or gonna, like these kind of things.
Or what do you mean? What do you mean?
Yeah, these kind of things. Obviously we do, like people in all different regions do that as well, but it's a specific characteristic of the Portuguese and Minas. All of the things that you need the language for, that I think when you're traveling, it's like you're just in that vibe of like trying to get by, so it's not really as like heavy, and you're doing kind of more superficial things, like, I don't know, like buying bus tickets, but then you'll go to a hostel where people are speaking all different languages, so it's not as intense. But when you're in like a tiny town where people only speak that language, and you need to like go to the doctors or go to the pharmacy and get a specific thing, like I couldn't really do anything by myself. Like Fernando at the beginning would have to like take him on and off work to come to the doctors with me, because I couldn't have that experience by myself. So or I did it by myself and like didn't go well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So. Went in the doctors with a sore arm, and he came out and gave me an optician's appointment or whatever.
Yeah. So that's why I say that it was one of the most difficult periods of my life, because I'd felt like I just lost my personality. Like I completely I think like what we're saying about in terms of who you are, and like language is really important to me, and communication is really important to me, expressing myself is really important to me, and when that's like taken away from you, you're like, you genuinely do have to like reassess like who you are like as a shell person of
yourself. And
I think in hindsight that was a really like amazing experience for me as a person in terms of like personal growth, because it puts you in a situation of just like complete observation, having to shut up and listen,
which crazy is a huge challenge, everybody. No, mentira, I'm joking.
But it was
yeah. Yeah. And having to be something that I would still struggle with it. I think I was still struggling with it before I came home. I love being the center of attention at social gatherings. Not being able to do that, or if there was like some kind of not heated debate, but some kind of, you know, real good conversation, not being the person leading that, or being center of attention, or being like the life and soul.
Yeah.
That was
Part of
tough
who
for
you
me.
are.
Yeah.
That's part of who you are.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you can't, if you don't have words, you can't express your personality. Up to a certain point you can, obviously people feel your energy, they feel that the kind of person that you are, but in terms of like the situations where you're in a social group, for example, and there's more people, you can't like highlight yourself or like, and that's what we're talking about as well in terms of expanding your vocabulary. You can't like make jokes or have like a cultural context to like be in the situation when you only have basic vocabulary. Like, this is a good point as well. I think the first stage is understanding, right? You begin to understand everything before you can verbalize it yourself. So especially like when you're there and you're understanding things, and maybe, for example, listening to things that you like don't agree with, or like there's a conversation that you want to be involved with and you just don't have the words to get involved.
Yeah. And if there's a exactly things that you don't agree with, which is what I was going to say, if there's like sensitive topics, or, you know, some kind of debate or whatever, and you haven't got it's not even necessarily like the vocabulary, but you haven't got the kind of tact, or it is vocabulary, but the way in which you approach like certain subjects, like it happens to me in classes all the time, and I'm sure it does for you as well, like talking about subjects that, you know, maybe it's not everyday conversation, but kind of borderline controversial things. Politics, I don't know, whatever, all of the isms. People haven't got that skill of, how do you approach this subject? What words do you have to say? What words can you not say? How can you put your opinion across without sounding like a bigot? Or you know what I mean?
Like, those kind of things are important when you're talking about sensitive topics. Like, those nuances are important.
But that would happen to me. Exactly. If somebody's talking about something and it's rubbing you up the wrong way, but you don't feel like, it's so frustrating, I can actually feel the anger boiling up in me now. They don't feel that confident to be able to put them in their place, which in English is difficult. I'm not good at that in English anyway. Like, being able to really, really articulate and explain why what they're saying, in my opinion, is wrong.
I am, and I just love a good debate. So that was just one of the most.
Sit down and shut up. Yeah.
Even necessarily not having the vocabulary to express it, but like the confidence to say what you want to say in that context.
And it is confidence, isn't it? You feel like you're going to say something and somebody's going to shoot you down, and you haven't then got the
you can't continue.
Vocabulary to go back at it, and then you look stupid when actually you're not. You've got it all there, you just can't express it.
One thing that Fernando would say to me in that period of time would be like, when we're like out and about and like in social situations and stuff, like, you don't show your personality, like you're not like funny how you are with me, and you're not like, you don't like show your personality to people. And I would say to him, I can't, like, I don't, like, I would get nervous about social situations, or I wouldn't want to go and be in a situation where we were going to meet new people, because we'd have to go through that whole thing of like, obviously at that time it was like obvious that I wasn't from here, so you'd like have to go through that whole conversation, or I wouldn't really know how I was going to be received, and it just created this whole social anxiety for me that I had literally never experienced in my life. Like, do you know what I mean? That's when you talk about your identity, like, I'm like an extrovert, I'm like social, I'm social butterfly, blah blah blah, and it's like, am I don't know. I was all of a sudden like, didn't want to be in those situations.
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? That's really good as well that I think it's really useful that you're opening up about that, because I think that's something that nobody ever talks about, or I've never, you know, it's not widely known, is it? You know, people don't talk about that struggle of getting to, obviously it's hard, everybody knows that it's hard, but don't talk about why it's hard, or what exactly is hard about it, and how, like, kind of not damaging, but yeah, it makes you really question.
It still makes, it's actually like, I'm a bit surprised by how much it makes me want to cry just talking about it now.
Yeah, well, it's tough. It's really tough.
Obviously there's other things happening at the time, like Fernando's dad had just died and stuff, but I was just like, I think that when we first moved to Conceição, I think I was genuinely a bit depressed, and like obviously it lasted for longer in terms of like what was difficult socially and stuff, but it was just a really difficult time for those reasons that we've talked about. But it's nice to come out the other side. And now when we go to Conceição, I just love it, because with that specific group of people, obviously I've known them for years now and stuff, but people always comment on how good my Portuguese is and how like just about me as a person, and that makes me really proud. And like now when I meet new people, I don't think twice about it, and I just feel like me, and that's like a really big achievement for me.
It is. And I think we could have a moment here, a moment of self-indulgence. Why not? We should, because I agree with you. I mean, you know, try to be kind of modest and humble about it, but when people say anything like, oh, you're English, or, you know, oh, you sound like this, you know, let's have a moment and say how good that feels, because it does, doesn't it? It's like, fucking sound wicked. That's a really nice feeling when somebody says, when somebody recognizes that, you know, the level that you've got to. So yeah, why not? Why can't we kind of pat ourselves on the back for that and say, because of how hard it is, you've got through it, and now you can do it, and you should be able to enjoy that and use it.
And people always say, don't they, as well, like, oh well, yeah, you must like have a certain like knack for it, or it like comes more naturally to you, which could be true, but it doesn't take away how friggin' hard it is. And that's not necessarily just the process of like you assimilating the language in your brain, but like all of the social, psychological things that come along with that. Let
me ask, because people might be wondering this, how long do you think that took you then? I mean, I know it's an annoying question when people are like, how long will it take me to speak English? But how, you know, put it into like time or numbers, how much time do you think that process lasted?
Oh God. Well, I think definitely it's never ending, but like you were saying at the beginning. But I think like to be like speaking and participating in conversations and stuff, like,
and feeling more confident in yourself,
an okay level, probably around 6 months. But in terms of like it being like grammatically correct and like being able to talk about more complex things and stuff, like a year to a couple of years. And then obviously every year that passes, that just gets more and more advanced, I suppose.
I think that's really, really not a lot of time at all. But also tell people about how the way that you did that was like full on, as you said before, super immersive. There were no kind of
I never did any classes. This is one of the things about, so when I'd learned like some Spanish while I was traveling and stuff, and then when we came to Brazil to live, I'd had a minimal contact with Portuguese traveling, more like food and like please and thank you and those kind of simple phrases. And then it was just but I think that sometimes I think about this as well, because I think about how, like what we were talking about, the observation and stuff and being interested in things. There are some really clear moments where I remember like some certain words that were difficult for me to get my head around, or that I wasn't quite understanding. And I would remember like every time I heard them, I would like repeat them in my head and try and think like, oh, so they use that then. And then the next time I heard it, I would be like, oh, so it's like that. And it's like that.
Confusing yourself more. Like, if they used it then why did they use it here? And then,
And that's another point as well, isn't it? A lot of people speak their own language incorrectly. Like we don't always speak grammatically correctly in English. So sometimes you're trying to like figure some things out, and why is this like this? And people are using slang or using like regional dialects that are not necessarily like correct on paper. So there's all of these like dynamic of like trying to figure all of that out.
But the point is that it was probably as deep a dive as you could get jumping into a new language. And that's what I think, that's really quick. You know, if you say 6 months and you were feeling a little bit better, and then 1 to 2 years, I think that's really quick. I think that's really, really quick.
Not like you, Rose.
I don't know. I was just going to say, I can't think. I don't even really know when I started learning Spanish. I mean, I started Duolingo.
I was going to say, because I think you're definitely like the kind of peak of your fluency. We would be talking about Mexico, wouldn't we? But you were speaking it way before that, like here.
Yeah.
After Uruguay, you're already.
Yeah. I think that was.
You were. I think would say you were
fluent
really then already, weren't you?
No. Do you know what? I was thinking about this, obviously, in preparation for this episode, but and it's, I've spoke to other people about it as well. My time, this is the most like counterintuitive, weirdest thing. My time in Brazil, 6 months that I spent in Brazil, was so beneficial for me in my Spanish. Do you know why? I'll tell you. Because okay, obviously in Brazil they speak a little bit of Spanish, right? Or you can get by kind of with Spanish.
Yeah, some of the verbs are similar, and so like Portuñol.
Yeah. But the main language is Portuguese, and so but I didn't have any Portuguese, and so I was kind of getting around, and I would go into shops and stuff, and or like people that I needed to speak to, and be like, "Hablas español?" Do you know what I mean? Like, but that this is funny actually that we would talk about this, and that was how I would get through it. I got through my 6 months in Brazil with the limited level of Spanish that I had, but that was so beneficial for my Spanish, you know. And then kind of whatever time that I spent with different people, it was mainly in Spanish. But that's the weird thing. Yeah, I think.
Well, yeah,
being in Brazil,
important to say as well that you were here. Fernando's fluent in Spanish.
Yeah.
Your girlfriend at the time was fluent in Spanish, so you had like in the home environment still contact with the language, didn't you?
Yeah. When I left Brazil and went to Mexico, that was when I started getting that good feedback of, oh wow, your Spanish is really good. And only then did I realize, oh shit, I actually can speak. Yeah, literally it was like that. I got off the plane in Mexico, and yeah, all of a sudden people were telling me how good my Spanish was, and I didn't realize. And that's the weird thing, being in Brazil helped me so much. But the funny thing that I wanted to say is that we joked about it a lot, didn't we, when so in Brazil I would go to people like, oh, you speak Spanish, like let's help me buying these bus tickets or whatever, do you speak Spanish? And they would say, yeah. And then I would go, oh, fuck. And I'm like, oh shit creek without a paddle, because right, they've now said yes, and now I've actually got nothing else to say, because
I just used it up. Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Yeah.
¿Hablas español?
Yeah, I speak Spanish. Oh shit, now what am I gonna say? Yeah, now I've already kind of bought into this now, and now I'm lost. But no, that was but again, I couldn't really say how long that was, because then, you know, right up until I left Mexico recently, I still, it's all a journey, isn't it? It's all a journey. And in that time, there are also times of ups and downs, and I can't really put them down. I'm not sure what to kind of attribute them to, but there were times when I was like, yeah, feeling really good. It could be just kind of random, going out one night and just being like extra fluent, I don't know, and have a really successful time. And then other times not feeling very able to communicate, and that really knocking my confidence and being like, oh, you know, it would really get to me, and I'd be like, oh, I can't do this, not doing this anymore, you know, like it's horrible, it really is. I
think we have those days in our own language as well. Like I think we forget that, you know, like some days where you just can't get your words out, and it's just like, and that's something that I've noticed that happens to me in both languages. But when you're in the learning stage, you're not thinking that, you're thinking like, oh, where are the words?
Why is this happening to me?
The person who's been the people who have been by your side, or who you've lived with, or who you've spent your days with throughout the majority of your Spanish experience, have had a good level of English.
Yeah, both. I think helped and hindered. It's a help and a hindrance. Definitely a hindrance for the obvious reasons that you've always got the way out. You've always got the easy way out, right? Like you've always, you're not being forced to speak in that language. You don't have to communicate. You're not forced to communicate in any language, which obviously is a disadvantage in terms of language learning, but a help. A help sometimes for
emotionally.
Emotionally, and for like just the days when you do feel like I just can't do this today. I just can't do this today. Do you know what I mean?
It's tiring. It's really
so
tiring.
Exhausting. So just when you need, I just can't think in Spanish, or I can't be bothered with it today. Do you know what I mean? Other things are going on or whatever. So that was a help. Or, occasionally when they've explained things in English to me, or how do you say this? I mean, kind of basic things like that. But yeah, it's made the process a lot slower, but perhaps a little bit kind of gentler as well. So I don't mind it too much. There's a there's a Bad Bunny lyric. We can cut this out, but there's a Bad Bunny lyric. I don't know. Do you listen to Bad Bunny, or does Fernando listen to Bad Bunny?
Yeah. Not like
religiously.
Yeah.
Okay, and this actually brings me on to something that I did want to talk about today. And he's dating Kendall Jenner.
Maybe I did, but no, I didn't remember that.
Bad Bunny, actually, I don't know if they still are, but I think so. Bad Bunny is dating Kendall Jenner in one of his new songs on his new like kind of trap album that he's released. He says something like, they ask how we communicate, because Bad Bunny doesn't speak much English. I don't know if you know that, but he's not very good. His English isn't very good.
Right.
And I highly doubt, and I'm sure that Kendall Jenner doesn't speak Spanish. So Bad Bunny says in one of his lyrics, he's like, they ask us how we communicate between ourselves, and it's better if we don't tell them. And when I heard that, I was like, that's so true. That's so true. And I love it. Like the idea that so many couples must be going through that. And obviously I can say I've had that, you know what I mean? Finding other ways to communicate, but it's kind of cheeky and it's kind of funny as well. But
I do think it's worth touching on that. Like, I don't know if you haven't had this experience, I'm sure it's really hard to fathom. I think it would have been hard for me to fathom as well. Having said all of that, it's difficult not being able to express yourself and communicate, I do think there are many, many other ways that you can connect with other human beings, and not just Fernando, but so many experiences that I've had while traveling, where you feel like you really genuinely know someone and you haven't exchanged one friggin' word of either of your language. So I do think there is a lot to be said for that, because I do this is so like cheesy.
So is that what Bad Bunny's talking about? Like... Bad Bunny's talking about these spiritual connections.
I never felt misunderstood by Fernando. I felt misunderstood by a lot of different people along this journey, but I never felt misunderstood by him,
which is key. And I remember having I don't speak Portuguese. Well, I've never spoken much Portuguese, but I remember having good connections with people, like some of your friends, Izzy. When I went to Minas, very few words were exchanged, but they were like, I knew that they were great people and they knew that I was a great person, and we just vibed. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy, isn't it?
And you can laugh, and there's eye contact and body language that really does speak 1,000 words. And that's something that my mum always says about Fernando as well. Like, it's not really until recently that they were able to have like more developed conversations, but they both like love each other deeply and genuinely feel like they know each other. So obviously I know I'm there to translate, but that's not all of it. Like,
as we've just mentioned, Bad Bunny, the wonder that is, the 8th wonder of the world. I want to briefly touch on that because my understanding, my ability to understand and speak Spanish, one of my favorite things about it is my newfound appreciation of Spanish music. That I can't even comprehend not knowing about this music and not listening to this music, and it's such a big part of my life now. Like, you ask any of my friends and they'll be like, oh, she's always going on about, like, oh, you know what I mean, and obviously in England it's quite difficult to get people to like listen to this stuff or to hear it anywhere, like but it's such an important part of my life, and it makes up probably 80% of what I listen to now is reggaeton or, you know, some kind of Spanish music, salsa, whatever. And I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to say, like, I really can't imagine life without it now, and I'm so grateful that I can do that, that I can understand it. I mean, I'm not saying you need to understand it to like enjoy this kind of music. You don't. You can, but
your love for it probably wouldn't have grown as much if you didn't understand
definitely
it.
Definitely not. And you know, like you know, take English rap or English hip hop or whatever, and you're listening to it and the lyrics, and you're like, yeah, the lyrics go in. I get that now. Like, you know, I go for a run and I listen to reggaeton and I'm like pumped up by it in the way that I would be like, years ago listening to Drake or whatever. Like, you know, it kind of gives me a boost. And I just absolutely adore it. And that's one of my favorite things about being in part bilingual is that, like, more exposure to music.
I feel like that in terms of, for Brazilian music, but also just everything about Brazilian culture. I can't really imagine that not being a part of my life. It's weird. But yeah, definitely music, a big part of it.
Yeah, because I think it's so rare. And again, this is what I mean, we can talk about this in another episode, but it's so mad to think that if you haven't traveled or if you haven't been to these places, you're completely unaware of all of these other worlds, complete worlds of music. Like, we think that music, or until I traveled, I thought that music was pop, rock, techno, you know, like these limited number of genres or whatever. And that is a 5% of what music actually is, because each country has its own salsa, bachata, samba, all of these things. Like, you know what I mean? That it's
and inside of each category there's also a whole another world of that category. So it's
unbelievable.
But I feel like that about communication as well, because I think like the language gives you a kind of like a new like tunnel into like looking at things and experiencing things. And it's crazy to think about the amount of places that I've been to where I didn't have that. Do you know what I mean? Like, my experience traveling as 100% as a tourist in Brazil versus like what my experiences are now is completely different. And obviously that's in large part due to the language and the understanding of the culture that you get through the understanding of the language. Because it's like you say about like the specific Spanish in Mexico, the specific Spanish that you like delved deeper into there, for example. So you have that in every language. Like, you have that and that appreciation for like all of the different dialects and the accents of the different region is something that I was already really fascinated by in England, for example. And here I just love it even more, and like how you get to know like the little quirks of people from each places that normally that's expressed like through language.
And
that comes together like, with music and like those cultural tastes.
And even like social media and stuff, isn't it? Like your feed now, like all of the funny things that you get in you know, that I get loads of stuff in Portuguese still popping up on mine, and I'm like, oh it's completely different. Different worlds. But I don't think it was ever on my radar to be bilingual. I saw it as very far away. I saw it as very like, not within my reach, to be honest.
I think it's something that I've always been fascinated by.
Yeah.
I always was really in awe of people who could speak other languages, but I didn't, like you said, I didn't necessarily think it was something that could happen to me, because you don't really, and this is part of like it is an arrogance that British people have, in terms of like, oh, you don't need to, because you know that wherever you go, you're going to find at least someone who can speak English. And I just want to say, like, this isn't a personal attack on anyone, but it is a really big cultural arrogance that we do have, because other people all over the world are having to like go after that skill basically from when they're born, because they know that that's something that they need to be able to get ahead in life, to work, and for like various other opportunities. And that is something that we just don't have to think about.
No.
And on the one hand it's a privilege, but on the other hand it is an arrogance. And I would say, like, obviously you can't possibly like, oh, I'm going to learn in depth every single language of every country that I want to visit. Obviously that's not the point, but I would say to make an effort to learn some key phrases and stuff when you are going to travel to another country, because it is just a respectful effort that you can, a small effort that you can make to show people that you respect them and their culture, and that you don't, you're not just wandering around the world expecting other people to invest their money and their time in learning your language just because you had the luck of being born in a country that colonized the world and now it's become a universal language. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it is like that, and it will be like that, but just because it's like that doesn't mean that you shouldn't kind of make an effort to pay back in somewhat. But I have this conversation with my students a lot, though, because people say, oh, you're so lucky, oh, you know, being born in England, you're so lucky that you already have this as your native language. And sometimes I say, is it though? Am I? Is it a blessing or is it a curse? You know, because okay, you are being forced to learn another language, because unless you learn this other language, there's only, you know, opportunities are limited for some people, and unless they can speak English. But by doing that, by having, it's like kind of what we're talking about being forced when your partner doesn't speak or whatever, but by being forced to, you're gaining this amazing skill, or this amazing opportunity. You know, I think, okay, I don't need to speak another language, but that's to everybody, that's to a lot of English people's detriment.
It is.
Speaking another language is a wonderful thing that is going to change your life for the better. And if a lot of people don't need to do that, then they won't, and that's sad. You know what I mean?
Perhaps if anyone listened to episodes 2 already, then you not hear it. The Eggman's just going back.
No, I can't hear
it. Yeah, but that's only when you're looking at it purely from a language point of view. Like, is it a privilege or a curse from English speaking point of view? A curse from the side of like that you don't have that motivation or that cultural expectation of you learning another language. But from like a cultural and socioeconomic point of view, it is a privilege, because in order for you to like the experiences that we've had, for example, of like traveling, you didn't have to think twice. You know what I mean? Book a ticket to Thailand, book a ticket to Brazil. Like, what language do they speak?
English.
Doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? You don't have to think about it. You don't have to be like, oh, I need to invest my time and do classes at 9 o'clock at night after work to try and learn another language, and like struggle at this thing my whole life so that I can get a promotion, so that I can go and do the trip that I want to do in Europe or whatever. And we don't have to think about that. I'm not saying that obviously, okay, that's not specifically our fault, but it's a fact of the world.
Yeah.
And it's not fair.
It's not, unfortunately. Briefly tell people, because when you say, oh, I'm forgetting to speak English, or I'm forgetting, you know, my English or whatever, briefly explain to people what that's about, because I guess to a lot of people that's going to sound like, what is she talking about? That's impossible. How can you forget English when you're English? But maybe explain a bit what you mean by that.
I think that when you're not using, okay, so I was saying to you that I'm loving this podcast experience because it's like a nice space where I'm being able to speak English, like my normal English. Because when you're teaching, sometimes you use like a more neutral accent or choose words that you know are going to be more easily understood by like a non-native speaker. And so I don't necessarily have that many opportunities in my day-to-day life where I'm talking English on like a normal level or on like a more sophisticated or like philosophical level. Some of my conversation classes are like that, but again, like it's still kind of mediated through my lens as a teacher. It's not like me just talking naturally. So when you're not using that vocabulary all the time and every day, it's not that you forget it, but it just kind of gets locked away in a different section of your brain. I'm sure there is science behind that. I think that when you're not accessing I think when you're not accessing information as much, it kind of says like, oh, okay, we don't need this right now. So sometimes it takes me longer to like think of the exact word that I want to say, or I say things in a really Portugueseized way, like is more translated from a way that you would say it, that you would express it in Portuguese, which there's definitely some kind of cognitive process with that as well.
Oh yeah.
But
you're getting a bit scientific for me, is he? I'm gonna tap out. But just so people know, before we started recording this episode, there are things that Izzy says that are like reverse translations from Portuguese. So she'll want to say something in Portuguese, but doesn't, obviously, because we're speaking English, but she'll say that in an English way. For example, something that's quite common, I think, in Spanish and Portuguese is to say que más, right? Like, what else? Right? So Izzy we'll be talking and Izzy will go, what else? Like, that's a common thing to say in a normal conversation in English, but in Spanish, Portuguese, it's like, que más? Like, what else is up? Like, you know, what's going on kind of vibe, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right? She also said that she was on the balcony taking some sun.
Sunbathing.
You were reaching out and taking a little bit of sun. Where were you taking it?
But I don't say it like, I know that it's wrong, but it's like I say
it's in an ironic way.
Trying to search for the word.
Yeah.
I was sunbathing.
Yes, well done. But another one, and this is one that Abby loved. Actually, it's not the same because it was a Brazilian person saying it, but kind of mistranslations that actually work really well and are really cute. Yeah. So when you were going to your workouts, when Abby was with you, and there was that guy going, let's go there, because you would say vamos lá, right? Like
in English it would be like let's go, or just let's go, right?
Yeah.
Let's
he was saying let's go there. Yeah. Where are we going? By the way, we're not poking fun, are we? Like, it's completely, this is the beautiful thing about it. You should laugh about it. And I say this to my students all the time, like, laugh, it's all right. Laugh.
Yeah, I mean, if it happens to us as native speakers, imagine.
Yeah, laugh at me. I mean, it's great.
Of course, it's going to happen.
You've got to laugh about it. Keep it lighthearted. But yeah, okay. Do the jingle, Izzy.
Quick fire round of questions.
Oh, goes off every time. Okay. I'm going first. Can I? Sorry, that was really fresh.
He always appears for
the quick
fire round of.
He's here for the quick fire round. He hears that jingle and he's running. He's like, yes, my favorite part of the show. Okay, let's make it quick fire. Hopefully these questions will be good. I've actually got 4, but all right. First one. What language, if any, would you like to learn next?
I was going to say maybe Italian, but I don't really know if that's the case anymore, actually. I would like to improve my Spanish. Does that not count?
No, it has to be a new one.
Oh. Yeah, no, go on. Arabic.
Yeah,
why not?
Just because
I would like to have the experience of like a different language, maybe that has like a different alphabet or something, and also just have cool. Like a show an appreciation to that part of the world as well.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
What was the most difficult part for you about learning the language in general?
The embarrassment and the shame of it not going right. The moments where you get confused, or the moments where you're speaking and you're not sure what you're saying is right. And as you know, Izzy, I'm a very kind of sensitive in those situations. I go red all the time, and I would get in a fluster, and those kinds of things would really like set me back and actually make me quite sad. They would really make me sad.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say that kind of scary, confidence knocking, awkward moments. Right? Yeah. Okay. Okay. In your opinion, what is the most beautiful language, whether it's one that you speak or not, and why?
Musical point of view, probably. I think Spanish. Okay. Spanish.
Okay, interesting. So
the way that it sounds when you don't understand it, probably Spanish. Before I spoke Portuguese, I didn't think it was a beautiful language to listen to. No, but now I do. Interesting.
Interessante.
What's your favorite non-English word that doesn't really have an exact translation? I think I know your answer to this too.
This is why I love you, Izzy, because I knew you was going to ask me something like this, and I've got the same question for you. Okay. You know my answer?
Potentially.
Oh, did you say non-English? Okay. Well, if it's non-English, probably saudade. Is that what you thought I was going to say?
Yeah.
But I've got some Spanish ones written down here. But first, quickly explain. You do it better than I can. You explain what saudade is.
It's like it's like a sentimental feeling of nostalgia. In English, it would only translate to like you missing someone, but it's more than that. It's like all of the senses that you get in terms of missing someone. And it could be like nostalgia, it could be missing, but it's like a feeling that you like want that specific moment or that specific person and everything that involves that.
But in Spanish, I was just typing a message to my friends and I wanted to say ganas, like que ganas. Que ganas de estar allí. And you can't say that in English, like
have what? A desire to.
Yeah, or like, okay, so you can say tengo ganas de comer. I feel like eating, but I feel like it's not the same as ganas as a noun, as this thing that you have. Like, oh, que ganas. Like, oh, I don't know. It's cute. It's like, yeah, feelings of desire or want, but not used in that same way. Yeah, that's a good one, isn't it? That's quite a nice one, actually.
Yeah.
All right.
What do you appreciate more about English now? Like either a certain word or a certain phrase, or maybe like a feeling in general about the English language that you didn't appreciate before, that now you feel like, oh yeah.
The way that people misuse it. So the kind of liberty that people feel to change the language and say things that are not correct, like not grammatically correct. Like, why are you saying it like that? It's not like that. But do
you have an example?
Yeah, kind of tret. So some people say in the Midlands or in the North, they say like, you've tret me really badly. Like treated. Like, why have you come up with this new past participle for the verb to treat, which already has a perfectly good one, treated, but you know that like misuse of it, which is kind of
universal as well.
But because of places, but I love that. Like when I talk to people around my hometown, I think they're using it so wrong, but they're owning it, and I love that. And I think, why not? Okay, do it. I think in a funny way, that's what I like most about it.
That's something that I learned at uni as well, in terms of like regional dialects become like a version of their own. So you can't say like, well, yes, on paper it's incorrect, but like, and that's the beauty of it, because like we mentioned earlier, you have that in every country. Yeah. So like I was saying about Minas, like that's the dialect from there. It's not incorrect. It's just how they speak there. So I love that as well.
Exactly. At the end of the day, what is the point of language? To get a point across, and if that point is understood or misunderstood or received in any way, then you've done your job, really. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's more complex than that in all of the things that you can take from language. But yeah, if what you want to say somehow reaches its destination, doesn't really matter how. Okay, final question then. Would you give what advice would you give to somebody wanting to learn another language, and not English, because obviously you give that advice in your job all the time, but you know, maybe someone from our country who wants to learn another language, what advice would you give them?
I would say, first of all, try and just be light about it. Like, if I don't know the circumstances, whether it's like you're doing it for some specific experience or if you're just doing it for fun, but either way, I would say just don't take it too seriously. Like, keep it fun. Not everyone has the same kind of interest that we have, like in the languages, but it still can be really fun.
Yeah.
And I would say, like, steer away from the traditional kind of like language learning materials that you find online, and try and just immerse yourself in like maybe music or series from that particular country or of that particular language, because at the end of the day, that is how we learn a language. Like, we don't learn our native language from books. After a certain age, we go and review the grammar, but how you learn language initially is hearing, ingesting the language, repeating it, getting it wrong and trying again. So this is the thing, like, it's difficult to make mistakes, and it's difficult to feel embarrassed that you're not expressing yourself in a correct way, but just try not to care too much about it, because that is part of the process, and through the mistakes, that's how you're gonna get it right. And if you think of like a child, a toddler, they're not speaking correctly in their native language, they're making mistakes, and we make cute little, you know, we say things wrong to like toddlers because of like a cute way that they say things or that they pronounce things. So you're gonna have to go through that process as an adult as well. So just embrace that, be a bit vulnerable, be a bit playful, and try and get, I think, into more of a childish mindset to like really enjoy it.
Yeah, I would second that wholeheartedly. Is that it?
Love it.
There you go, guys. And my final thought is, well, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Do it. You will not regret learning another language. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. Yeah.
Well, it'll blow your mind.
Well, I was listening to that.
We can close with Jan's quote.
Big up Jan de Gravio. Listening to this in your kitchen.
My mum sent us both a little quote. Those who know nothing of foreign languages know nothing of their own.
Mic drop. True. You have been listening to
Anglatinas.
Yay! Thank you, guys.
Bye.